Miss Lee, Mr. Miller, Mr. Montague. Thank you, sir. Miss Morrison, Mrs. Nita Garvey, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Phillips, Dr. Phillips, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Sibley, Mr. Slowly, Mr. Slowly, Mrs. Vaz, Dr. Wheatley, Mr. Williams, Mr. Wilson, and Mr. Wright. Mr. Davis.
Thank you. Members, it is indeed a pleasure to be alive and well for 2023. As a government, and I mean every single one of us seated in this house today, and those who are not yet here to join us, this year gives us again an opportunity to serve the people of Jamaica with all vitality and vigor. I know that our ministers of government see 2023 as nothing more than opportunities and opportunities to bring prosperity to the people of Jamaica. I trust we all seated in this house will continue to work in unison so that Jamaica may, under God, continue to increase in beauty, fellowship, and prosperity. Today we have 33 students seated here with us from Titchfield High School. You look lovely in the gallery. Welcome to the House of Parliament. I hope today will indeed be a wonderful session for you to watch and enjoy. We have several statements by ministers. Over to the leader of the House, House Leader.
Madam Speaker, I want to join you in offering my own greetings to members of the House, and I hope that in fact we do have not just a happy new year, but a productive new year, an exciting new year, and a prosperous new year, because prosperity, we understand that metaphor very well. Madam Speaker, this fiscal year, as it winds down, and certainly this parliamentary year, as it comes to a close, can offer us an opportunity for reflection. And indeed, Madam Speaker, among the things that will definitely go down in history is the fact that this honorable House, for the first time in my memory, and I'm here 38 years now, first time in my memory, start promptly at 2 p.m. at every sitting. And today was no exception. And Madam Speaker, we want that tradition to prevail and that it becomes part of the course, because it is a great statement of discipline and it shows the constituents that we represent, how serious we are about our responsibility and how assiduous to duty we are in executing the mandate that they gave us. So, Madam Speaker, today we will have, of course, the tabling of the SOE regulations as well as the needs regulation, and we'll have a number of statement ministers led by our Prime Minister himself, the Minister of Constitutional Affairs, Legal Affairs and Constitutional Affairs, of course, the Minister of Education and Youth, the Minister of National Security, and of the Minister without portfolio in the office of the Prime Minister. Madam Speaker, I just wanted to indicate that it doesn't always offer an opportunity to a House leader to be able to mention things on his portfolio. But I want to ask permission to indicate, and of course with the permission and the acquiescence of my friend and counterpart on the other side, the member from East Kingston and Port Royal. And I'll just give a very brief and short update on the industry that I represent and the portfolio area that I have responsibility for in this House. Because, Madam Speaker, it's worthy of it. Because we know that the global picture is not one of great excitement at the moment, but this is one of concern. As many have described, ominous clouds relating to possibilities for recession. The IMF itself saying that a third of the globe is likely to go into deep recession. But today we got a better news, Madam Speaker, in that the World Bank is saying now that the recession might be averted this year and that there could be a 0.05% growth in the main markets that we have. And we are excited to hear that. We are really excited to hear that. But, Madam Speaker, one of the things that I wanted to assure, not just this Honorable House, but the nation, is that the stewardship of tourism in Jamaica is focused and committed to ensure that notwithstanding the ominous clouds that may be hovering, we are focused on growth, and we will continue to grow the industry. And we have had growth even in difficult times, because if you recall, the recession of 2008 to 10, which was recorded as the worst recession that the world had seen in 80 years, that we were able to grow tourism 3% every year during the recession, and the economy of Jamaica stayed steady, and we didn't lose a single financial institution during that recession. And the winter season so far, Madam Speaker, has started, and we use the term with a bang. And what a bang it is. Because the January figures to date is showing a 463% increase over last year. 463% increase over last year. And a 29% increase over 2019. We ended the year equaling the record-breaking earnings of tourism of $3.64 billion. And the fiscal year, which I'll report on when we make our budget presentation, is going to show a $4.2 billion earning in tourism, which will be $500 million more than 2019, which is the best year in our history. The workers are back, by and large. We still have a small gap of about 20% or so who naturally would have morphed into other areas of activity after the recession, the pandemic. They would have probably gone into, the technologies. They might have gone into entrepreneurial activity on their own. And some have remained in their homes because of what has happened during the recession, the pandemic. During the pandemic, families learn a little bit more of what it is to stay together. And 65% of the workers at tourism are women with families. And a number of them have taken the position that it is better to be at home, to nurture. And there are other reasons too that we are examining. So in the context of the worker situation, Madam Speaker, I just want to indicate that a great effort is being made to change the labor market arrangements in tourism. And we've been working on that assiduously, starting with the pension plan. Jamaica has a world-class pension program. Indeed, we are the only country in the world that has a comprehensive tourism workers' pension plan that includes every segment of tourism. Every segment. And notwithstanding the fact that the pandemic came and prevented us from actually starting, but we started March of 2022. And in the period, we are now just a little shy of 8,000 paid up members, and we have savings from them of 350 million Jamaican dollars. And we think that we will make 10,000, as is my initial target, within this winter season, and then we take it on for the future, and the expansion is going to be exponential. Because among other things, this is going to be perhaps the largest pool of domestic savings, arguably in the Caribbean. Because the potential for this pension program is to have over 350,000 members. And that saving will bring billions of dollars, which will now become a pool of affordable funds for capital development and for on lending for various other investment projects. And we know in economics that one of the bases on which solid growth is predicated is when the domestic savings of a country is converted into investment. Because the investment flows then stays in the country and continue to create capital formation and to build the economy. So we are excited about what the pension plan is about. It's not just about the straight social security for the workers, which is key, but it's an important economic tool for growth and development in the country. Housing, Madam Speaker, is something that we're excited about also. And all the new investments that are coming. The one that we broke ground for in December, the Hard Rock, and the one that is coming for St. Anne, and also in Negril, all have housing components onto it. Hard Rock is going to build 1,000 houses in St. James for the workers of the tourism industry. And every single investor that we have been talking to, Prime Minister, myself, Minister Hill, the team of us who meet with these investors, heavily predicated a social component to our investment, so that the communities must grow along with the investment within the area. And we're excited about that. So, Madam Speaker, I'm only making the point that the new tourism that we're driving is one that is going to be far more inclusive, one that is going to enable the benefits of tourism to be felt and realized
but I can say for this chamber, led by the Speaker, who is not here today, but certainly supported by you and the leader and ourselves, we need to commend ourselves for starting Parliament on time and to being here. Madam Speaker, we through you, allowed the leader of government business to speak about his portfolio. And if there is one area in life in Jamaica that both government and opposition are one, it is in relation to the importance of tourism to our growth and development. It continues to shine in the firmament, and acknowledgement has to be given. And of course, the minister, you are the head, so when there are problems, you bear them. And we're not saying that there are no problems, but today is the first day of the year. So no, you can rest assured we are not going to look today at the problems. We have to acknowledge the tremendous return of tourism, and as probably yes, it must be the leading economic activity coming out of COVID and now. And to see the restoration and indeed the growth is a tremendous, tremendous commentary on the commitment of the workers, in addition to the government, but of the workers in this industry. And what has really lifted my heart in the minister's words is that the workers now are going to be a part of this inclusive sharing of the gains from this tremendous industry. So I want to add our words of commendation and indeed to wish all our colleagues well in 2023. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
House Leader.
Madam Speaker, the item statement by ministers will now be activated, and I invite you to ask the Minister of Legal Affairs and Constitutional Affairs to make her statement. Please, Madam Speaker.
All right, statement by ministers, and the first minister to address the House is the Honourable Marlene Malahoo Fort, KC MP, Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs.
Madam Speaker, permit me to join in wishing you and the members and staff of this Honourable House a Happy New Year. We look forward to working assiduously to get the work done. Madam Speaker, it is usual for the statement to be provided and circulated. I have indicated to the leader of opposition business that I will have to do some tweaking of the statement, and it will be important that those matters be reflected in the statement for the record. And so I apologize in advance of not making the statement available. And I thank him for his gracious understanding. Madam Speaker, you will recall that I made a statement on November 15, 2022, updating this Honourable House and the people of Jamaica on the constitutional reform work undertaken over the years, the matters on which bipartisan and broad consensus was reached, what was implemented, and what remains to be done. Madam Speaker, I promised then that a high-level constitutional reform committee would be established to facilitate consultation, collaboration, exchange of perspectives, and to provide advice on the remaining work to be done, as well as the sequential steps to be taken towards further implementation of the recommendations of the Joint Select Committee on Constitutional and Electoral Reform, on which consensus remains. This statement, Madam Speaker, is intended to provide the Honourable House and the people of Jamaica an overview of the work to be undertaken by the Constitutional Reform Committee, including indicative timelines. Madam Speaker, the purpose of the high-level Constitutional Reform Committee is to assist in providing expert guidance and oversight to the government and people of Jamaica during the constitutional reform process to implement recommendations on which consensus has been reached. And also, Madam Speaker, to help to build consensus where it has eroded or is non-existent on important related matters. In particular, the committee will be required to assess how the passage of time has impacted the recommendations of the Joint Select Committee on Constitutional and Electoral Reform contained in its final report in 1995, which recommendations were submitted to and approved by the Parliament, and to advise what fresh perspectives ought to be considered in the light of any national, regional, or international development between then and now, and to recommend any necessary modification to update the recommendations for implementation. Madam Speaker, the committee will also be required to evaluate the said recommendations on the establishment of the Office of President and advise on the nature of the presidency, the qualification and tenure of the President, the legislative, executive, or ceremonial powers to be exercised by the President. The committee will also assist coordinating the required parliamentary cross-aisles and nationwide consultation and collaboration during the various phases of the reform work, and in particular to help educate the electorate on their role in the referendum process in order to successfully transition from a constitutional monarchy to a republic, and to deal with related matters for which referendum is required. Committee will generally agree on the sequence of steps to be taken to implement the recommendations, as well as any other recommendation that is required to be implemented in order to achieve the overall reform goal. Madam Speaker, you would recall that I indicated that the goal really is to ultimately craft a modern constitution which reflects appreciation and understanding of our cultural heritage, our governance challenges, and our development aspirations, and which embodies the will of the people of Jamaica. And so, Madam Speaker, the committee will be expected in helping to guide the process of comprehensively reviewing the Constitution with a view to providing this new Constitution. It will work in 3 phases. The first phase will involve the repatriation of the Constitution of Jamaica, abolition of the constitutional monarchy, the establishment of the Republic, and all matters within the deeply entrenched provisions of the Constitution for which a referendum is required to amend. Phase 2, Madam Speaker, will involve review of the wordings and provisions of the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedom set out at Chapter 3 and the other ordinarily entrenched provisions of the Constitution for which amendments are desired and required. Phase 3, Madam Speaker, will end with a full assessment of the nation's legal and constitutional infrastructure that will facilitate drafting of the new constitution, and the committee will provide guidance and support to the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs during the entire process. The committee is expected to regulate its own proceedings to ensure that all aspects of the work are completed on time and within the budget that we will agree. In conducting its review and making recommendations, the committee is expected to do a number of things, including examining the provisions of the Order in Council, the Constitution of Jamaica, and the Jamaica Independence Act to identify the provisions, if any, which will require amendment to give effect to the reform recommendations. It will also advise and make recommendations concerning the shift from a constitutional monarchy to a republic, including identifying the most ideal and pragmatic type of republic to frame Jamaica's governance structure. It will also comparatively examine the processes adopted by other constitutional monarchies that have transitioned to a republic, taking into consideration any nuance provision in the Constitution of Jamaica that does not exist elsewhere. It will also conduct in-depth review of the provisions of the Constitution, making recommendations for reform where necessary and advisable. Madam Speaker, the process must be a collaborative, consultative process. Many still ask whether we can make the transition without the holding of a referendum. It cannot happen. We must have a referendum to make the changes to the Constitution and to establish the Republic of Jamaica. And it must involve cross-aisle collaboration as well as consultation and collaboration with the people of Jamaica. Madam Speaker, today it was our intention to announce the names of the members of the committee, and the Prime Minister will have the honor of so announcing the membership of the high-level committee. But I regret to advise the people of Jamaica that we are not able to do so today. I do regret that I will have to say some of what I have to say without having a follow-up conversation with the leader of the opposition. Madam Speaker, we understand that, there comes a time when we have to come together in spite of our differences, in spite of our political differences. We have to come together and arrive at consensus. We know that it is not easy to build consensus. We know that there are matters that both sides of the parliamentary aisle feel passionately about. But for those matters where we do not now have consensus, and for which a referendum is not required, it was the Prime Minister's and my hope that we would be able to come together, government and opposition, to move forward while we work through the differences, and to focus our attention on those matters on which we have reached consensus, those matters which involve the vote of the people to make the change, the referendum. Sadly, Madam Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition has advised that the concerns he has are such that he will not be naming the members of the opposition to sit on the committee at this time. I don't think I can express sufficiently to the people of Jamaica how disappointed I am with this position. It has not taken me by surprise that there are matters that the parliamentary opposition feels strongly about, and in particular, the issue of the final court for Jamaica. But, Madam Speaker, we do not at this time have consensus, even though we are agreed on many other things on the particular subject matter. Madam Speaker, I'm going to use an analogy. As members of Parliament, you know, as a member of Parliament, I remember fixing a road in my constituency that had been left in a bad state for over 40 years, I was told. And many millions of dollars were spent fixing the road. We had other roads to be fixed. No sooner had the fixing taken place than cracks began to be visible in it. And I said, well, this is the newest road. Having spent so much money on it, so much time, we should fix the cracks so that they don't get worse. Some people took the view that the road was newly fixed, you shouldn't do that. Go and fix another road. And I say, but we don't wait until it becomes $1 million problem for us to fix it. Not because it was the newest piece of work. We shouldn't fix the problems that have arisen.
The member's time for speaking has expired. House Leader.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the member's time be extended sufficiently to complete this statement. Madam Speaker, I crave your indulgence for this exception for the simple fact of the critical importance of state relation to the constitutional arrangements that are being preferred, and especially to outline the level of consultation or that is being done and will be required to enable a completion of this. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
House, the question is that the member be allowed sufficient time to complete statement by Minister. Those in favour? Notwithstanding the standing order and the requirement to speak for 12 minutes exactly and to be responded to by 5 minutes exactly, the House is being asked to give a special permission as a result of the nature of the discussion being had by the Minister and the importance of the matter to allow for her to speak up until the time her statement is complete. Those in favour? Those against, the ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, I am grateful for the indulgence afforded me. Madam Speaker, I was saying that based on the communication, the Leader of the Opposition has expressed concern about the amendments to be undertaken to the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedom. And it is obvious that he harbors a suspicion about what we intend to do. Madam Speaker, Prime Minister Holness and his team are interested in only one thing, is to ensure that every Jamaican is provided with an enabling environment and that we are able to deal with our most pressing issues in a way that is fair and in a way, Madam Speaker, that gives all Jamaicans the best chance to live their best life. There is no need for anyone to be suspicious about any reform, constitutional reform work to be undertaken under the leadership of Andrew Holness administration. There is no need to be suspicious. I say that, Madam Speaker, in the first place, Constitution does not lend itself to easy amendment. And matters that are The Constitution of Jamaica has 3 types of provisions. One that we call ordinary provisions. To amend an ordinary provision of the Constitution, it requires the majority of votes of all members of both houses of Parliament. This is in contrast to the majority of all members present and voting. We have the ordinarily entrenched provisions. And to effect change there, Madam Speaker, it requires a 2/3 vote in both houses. We don't get to 2/3 in the Senate without the vote of the opposition. And the Constitution provides that you can go to the people if you do not get the required vote. And it sets out the procedure. And then we have the deeply entrenched provisions, which also require 2/3 vote in both houses, and then the vote of the people in a referendum to make the change. There is absolutely no way that any government can change the entrenched or deeply entrenched provisions of the Constitution in secret. Attempts were made in the past to do it, and those were struck down. And I've heard repeatedly said that it is only under this administration that we have had rulings of unconstitutionality. Not so. But I say that to say, Madam Speaker, that no constitutional reform work can be done in secret. And it is precisely because we understand the process that is involved that we know we must go to the people. And we must seek bipartisan consensus. And we must collaborate. And so, Madam Speaker, I can't even find the right words to express the level of disappointment I feel, because if there are concerns, and I understand the concerns, don't hold up the naming of the committee. The purpose of the committee is to provide guidance. The purpose of the committee is to help to build consensus and to ensure that the views of the parliamentary opposition are taken into account. Madam Speaker, I really am beyond disappointed, because I thought once and for all, government and opposition and the majority of the people were in agreement that we should move full speed ahead. In fact, Madam Speaker, persons were questioning what was happening in the ministry between last year, January 10, 2022, and today, 1 year to date. And we have spent the time to go through in detail and take stock to ensure that we can move as speedily as possible, because it is our intention to have the referendum early 2024. Madam Speaker, it will take at least 9 months, 9 to 12 months, ambitiously, to pass the bill to amend the Constitution to establish the Republic of Jamaica. The Constitution says there must be a 3-month delay between first reading and second reading. We can't start the debate unless 3 months have elapsed. And then there is another 3 months between the second reading and the third reading. That makes it half a year of dead time. Half a year of dead time. So it doesn't matter how ambitious our goals are, we will not get it done before 9 to 12 months if everything else flows smoothly. And it was our hope that having passed the bill, we could then prepare the people of Jamaica in unison, both sides going together to the people to help them vote in a way to ensure that we succeed in achieving the goal, not to go competing. And that's why we even thought that we would avoid holding the referendum at the general election time, when people become encamped in their partisan perspective. And so, Madam Speaker, we are ready to proceed. We have set out in details draft terms of reference for the committee to adopt. We have set out indicative timelines. We have a compilation of all the background documents, and we have done even a little bit more. But I regret today that the Prime Minister will be unable to name the committee because we do not wish to go ahead without the opposition naming its members. And so, some of what the opposition leader wishes to have discussed, the committee was supposed to help us with. People of Jamaica will have to decide. We are ready to go otherwise, Madam Speaker, and it is my hope that we will not be forced to go without the opposition, but we are ready to go. May it so please you.
Thank you, Madam Minister. Leader of the opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and may I join with others who have spoken already today to wish everyone here all the very best, to them and their families, for the new year 2023, and my hope that we will have a productive year, a year in which we can work together as much as possible to advance the interests of the Jamaican people. I'd also like to echo the sentiments in particular to the staff of Parliament for all that they do, and hope that the new year finds them in good health and strong spirits, and committed to continuing to support the work that we do, as without them we wouldn't be able to do anything in here. Madam Speaker, I wrote to the Minister on the 3rd of June 2022 when she first had written to me about this committee that she was proposing to set up and was seeking to have 2 representatives from the opposition to sit on it. I responded with some concerns and questions which I asked her to reply to. I didn't hear from her then. About a month later, I sent a follow-up letter requesting a reply. Since then, from time to time in conversation, I've had occasion to ask her please to write to me in response to my letter of June the 3rd. And several promises were made to do so. I received the response last Thursday. And that response set out some positions on the matters I'd raised and asked me to respond with the naming of our committee members before today. I wrote to the Minister again today, saying to her, first of all, that on the main issue on the table in terms of constitutional reform, which is Jamaica to move from being ruled with a head of state, if not governed, by a monarch based in the UK, to having a Jamaican head of state, a president, that as part of that process, we don't do it in a piecemeal way, but we complete our decolonization, achieve full sovereignty and political independence by moving away from the Queen's Privy Council as our final court and acceding to the jurisdiction of the Caribbean Court of Justice as our final court. The issue of access to justice for our people and access to their final court of appeal is a very real, practical issue, and the current arrangements are fundamentally inaccessible. Jamaicans need to have a visa to visit the UK, as do their Jamaican counsel. And the cost inherent in a process of litigating in the United Kingdom, unless you're lucky enough to get pro bono, which means free of charge support from UK lawyers, which is usually in the context of death penalty cases, Jamaican litigants are unable to take their appeals there. So most matters which involve complex or important points of law end at the level of the Court of Appeal, which is not the final level of our judicial system. And this is hampering the development of our jurisprudence and fettering the right of our citizens to due process and access to justice. This is an important and fundamental matter for us, and we believe that both issues should be addressed at the same time. The minister has also indicated that there's to be a referendum on the monarchy and on other matters which have not been disclosed to us. I've written to her to say I would like full and transparent disclosure of which amendments requiring a referendum the government is intent to pursue. I would like to know that before we embark on this committee exercise. The minister has also told us that she intends...
The Leader of Opposition's time for speaking has expired. House Leader.
Madam Speaker, in light of my own resolution, notwithstanding standing orders, to allow the Leader of the Opposition the additional time to complete his statement, bearing in mind that he appreciates the latitude that is offered in this context. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Opposition Leader.
Thank you, Leader of Government Business. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The minister also indicated that part of this exercise is to do a review of the Charter of Rights. Now, the Charter of Rights was enacted in 2011 after a decade and a half of development, of work which was done together, both sides were involved, and it modernized the previous chapter 3 of the Constitution. That new chapter 3, the Charter of Rights, has created an array of important rights for our people. Some of the provisions of it have been subject to litigation. Some of those matters are subject to appeals, which are pending. In my view, it is very early in the life of the Charter for us to be reviewing and seeking to amend it. Also, the minister, when she was Attorney General, told this House that sometimes the rights of the people have to be abridged or abrogated. Now, in that context, and the context of the way in which the Constitution has been treated in the last several years, I have asked the minister to disclose in a full and transparent way the specific changes to the Charter which the government is intent to pursue. I would like to know what those are before we embark on the exercise of reviewing. So it is not a question that I am refusing to nominate members from the opposition to sit on this committee, but I am asking, and I expect and hope to receive the clarity, transparency, and disclosure that we want and that the Jamaican people deserve as to where the government intends to go on these important matters. With that disclosure, we will feel much more comfortable that if we participate in this exercise, we are doing so with a full understanding of where the government intends to go. There may be matters which are not technical legal matters, but are more issues of principle affecting the political system and the democratic system that we are all practitioners in, which may require some discussion to resolve those issues outside of the context of this committee of experts. So that is where we are today, and I would love to proceed and appoint our members to the committee, but I expect a response, giving the information which we have reasonably required, that the Jamaican people are entitled to know, and I hope that that reply won't take another 6 months, because everybody is frustrated that we seem to be no further along a year after this new ministry was created. So I urge the minister, I understand your disappointment, but put that behind you and let us try and sort this out so that we feel comfortable to go down the road with you, the particular road that you are seeking to travel on. And it is not that we're unwilling to do so, but we want to do so with a good understanding, a full understanding of the direction that you intend to take us when we go there. We don't want to be going there and to find that policy issues are being raised with which we have fundamental disagreements, and that would be counterproductive. Let us know where we stand at the outset so we can make it clear to you what our positions are on those issues, and maybe we can resolve them in a different way than a committee where we have two representatives would be dealing with what I would regard as more technical aspects of the issues. So that's where we stand. We are not intending to delay anything. We haven't taken 6 months to reply. I replied today, having been written to on Thursday. That reply came to me 6 months after my letter to the minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it looks like today is a day of disappointment, because for the Leader of Opposition to harp on he's not getting a written response without making it clear that he and I spoke and that I had addressed all of his issues. And so, no, I addressed the concerns, and shortly thereafter, to the best of my ability, and shortly thereafter, I spoke in the Parliament and provided even more information than that which he requested. And during the interim, I have taken the time to speak to the Leader of the Opposition. So to say that he was waiting for a response without disclosing that he had been responded to, albeit not in the format, is a little disingenuous. But let us go beyond that. It couldn't have been that he was waiting for that.
Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I don't like to interject in a petty way, but just to say, on a point of order, that the minister is misrepresenting what I said. I acknowledge that we had conversations. I regard those as brief and informal conversations on a very serious issues, which I was asking for a written response, which I received on Thursday. It's as simple as that.
Mr. Speaker, in respect of the information was provided in writing, because the ministerial statements had the information and they were disclosed. But let's not delay on that matter. You know, Mr. Speaker, so the Leader of the Opposition perhaps, well, is saying that because I made a statement when I was Attorney General, it really makes him suspicious of what move. In other words, I remind everyone to go back and listen to what I said. Because when the Constitution provides for something, it can't be said to be unconstitutional. And this is a nonsense that I hear boxing about the place. In the statement I made, I said that we were prepared to do the infringement, the abridgment, or the abrogation where it was demonstrably justified. Everybody has since played the statement and stopped it short. But the good thing about records is that we can always access the records and be corrected. So whether you are uncomfortable with what I said or not, If the Constitution provides for it, it is not unconstitutional. Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, the question of access to the final court is a sore issue. And if I were to really rip apart the approach taken, which now is raising and causing all of the concerns. You know, Madam Speaker, the real challenge for me is not to follow bad example. Let me just say that it has to be of concern that there is a visa requirement. But you know, Madam Speaker, what I discovered is that the first time any conversation was had with representatives of the UK government and the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council on the issue of access to the Privy Council was when it was had by me. And the visa was not imposed during the time that I've held office. I have had meetings on this issue, successful meetings, if I must say, in accordance with how success could be defined. The first time I am told that any conversation was had about visa requirement for the Privy Council was when I dared to have them in a meeting at the Privy Council and in a meeting with a minister of the UK government, officially in a bilateral meeting at the Commonwealth Law Ministers meeting. And I raised the concern that to situate the visa policy in the immigration policy of the United Kingdom was a demonstration of a lack of understanding that this was an access to justice issue. And I was told that they could not respond because the argument was clear. And we are now seeking to address it. But all of us who are in government, and especially those who have held ministerial position, understand that issues of visa have wide consideration, but that conversation is taking place. The other conversation that we must have is what will happen in the unlikely event that we do not get the vote of people to change the form of government. Because many Commonwealth realm countries have tried and have failed so far. And what will it mean for Jamaica? We will have to have a conversation with His Majesty's government in the United Kingdom. And we on this side have begun that conversation. So to say, Madam Speaker, that the final court should be a matter that detain us, it doesn't require a referendum for that change to be made. And the whole purpose of the committee is to assist us to speak through our differences and to ensure that the perspectives from the parliamentary opposition are very much there. So I'm really not so sure that I understand it, because what I'm hearing is that unless you do it the way we want to do it, we're not prepared to go along with it. Well, the whole purpose of putting a committee in place is to work through the issues that we know exist. The whole purpose of doing it. And you see, Madam Speaker, this argument about you don't amend something because it's new is the same kind of argument that would leave a newly fixed road that break up, not to be touched because it's the latest road you fix, and wait until it becomes $1 million or multi-million-dollar problem. You won't know what issues we're seeking to address unless we sit down and look at them. The way the committee is to be constituted is so that we can get expert guidance on the matters that we can move beyond the political differences and once and for all put the nation of Jamaica at high priority. And so on every issue of concern, Madam Speaker, if you have concern, why hold up something that you don't need a referendum for? Instead of going forward while we work out the differences. People of Jamaica will decide, Madam Speaker. The people of Jamaica will decide.
For clarification, Madam Speaker. For clarification, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, the people of Jamaica will decide. It is my hope that we will proceed on those matters on which we have consensus. And the Constitution, in its wisdom, the framers, in their wisdom, have provided for a mechanism that we can proceed with in the event of any failure to meet bipartisan consensus. And people will have their say, Madam Speaker. I will formally respond to the opposition leader's letter.
Madam Speaker, I had reason earlier for clarification.
He can also be guided by what I have said, because that is where we are now. And so while he may not get the form of response, he would know the substance of the response.
Thank you, Madam Minister. Member Bromberg, you may stand.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, since we have been speaking about consensus for a little while in Jamaica, I went back to look at some of the democratic and participatory approaches to consensus building. And therefore, I wanted to just find out from the Minister whether or not she was aware that there are certain things that we really require if we are to have consensus. One is a clear process. The other is a clear understanding of the purpose of the discussion. The second is a win-win attitude, which requires that at the very least we are clear on those issues where each party stands and their willingness to have a conversation that could lead to a different position. From the presentation of the minister, it seems to me as if that those issues are not clear, because what I'm seeking for understanding in terms of the question I'm also asking, if one party says, I'd like to be clear on what the discussion is, can you put those items in writing? I cannot understand for the life of me why anyone would take that as something that is an insult to them or an attack on them, or the process. Simply put it in writing so that it can be looked at and so that a response can be given.
Minister.
Madam Speaker, let me just I'm beginning to see that the work will be much more difficult and challenging. But the purpose of the high-level committee is to assist in providing expert guidance and oversight to the government and the people of Jamaica during the reform process. Madam Speaker, we indicated that we're not starting this reform from scratch. We have recommendations on which there was bipartisan consensus and wider consensus. And we are revisiting those matters on which consensus remain. And unless I read wrongly, it was our understanding that there was consensus that we would abolish the constitutional monarchy, go through the process, and establish the Republic of Jamaica. It appears that we may have been wrong. I don't set the process for this kind of constitutional reform, Madam Speaker. It is set out at Section 49 of the Constitution of Jamaica, with which we must comply. It is a difficult process, and that is why we are coming together with a committee. Time has passed between the recommendations and now, and we must see, are the perspectives still the same? Clearly they aren't, but that is what the committee will help us to work through. So the starting point, as I indicated when I spoke to the House and provided the statement, in writing were the recommendations of the Joint Select Committee on Constitutional and Electoral Reform, the recommendations contained in their final report of 1995 submitted to the Parliament and accepted, and that was set out in writing. So, pardon me if I'm a little slow in understanding what else I need to say to then move to the next stage, because we're not starting the work from scratch. The recommendations have been made, they were agreed on. We have consensus on some. We do not have consensus on others. Perspectives have changed over 2 decades, and that is why we're reviewing. And we will have the input of everyone. As a government, we will say, here is our thinking on the matter. What are your thoughts? What guidance do we need? What do we need to heed? And that is part of the process. Part of the process. It's not the intention to have that process. So, Madam Speaker, we will have talk. No, you see, Madam Speaker, my simple understanding is that the parliamentary opposition is saying we are not prepared to go ahead unless you're prepared to accede to the appellate jurisdiction of the CCJ. That is simply what it boils down to. We're not going until you do CCJ. That is what they're saying. Madam Speaker, you hear the shouts of rubbish from the parliamentary opposition, which the letter says, I consider that the move to make Jamaica a republic ought to walk in tandem with the move to accede to the CCJ as our final court of appeal. Anyway, Madam Speaker, be assured. Madam Speaker, be assured that it is not in, Madam Speaker, we do not, I can only speak from where I am monitoring the issue. We consider it unfortunate that the parliamentary opposition is twinning accession to the appellate jurisdiction of the CCJ to the move to abolish the constitutional monarchy and establish the Republic of Jamaica. I thought that when they said that we should complete the move, that they meant it, but clearly it was plain talk. Plain talk. So, Madam Speaker, the opposition leader can expect a response in similar vein to what I have said. As of now, we do not have consensus on the final court, though we understand the concerns and we too have concerns. And it is our hope that we would have heard each other out and build consensus with the assistance of the mechanism of the Constitutional Reform Committee, and that we would do so without delay. It was my hope. It was my hope. But, Madam Speaker, the people of Jamaica will have their say.
Thank you, Madam Minister. House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. At this time, I ask you to invite the Honorable Dr. Horace Chang, Deputy Prime Minister, to make a statement.
We now invite for statement by ministers, the Honorable Dr. Horace Chang, MP, Minister of National Security.
Yes, copies are available. I think they're given today.
They're sent to the speaker, yeah. Copies are available. Should be. Yes.
Statements are being circulated.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Let me add a short word of welcome to all the members after the Christmas season and in the year. Hope everybody had a peaceful time, renewed energy, and ready to take on the challenges of 2023 with vigor, vim, and high levels of productivity. And we'll be in Parliament doing the work, the people's work. This short statement, Madam Speaker, really raise public order and the events to take place very quickly. Breach of the Road Traffic Act is indeed among the biggest, most significant cause of disorder on our roadways. Indiscipline and disorder on our roadways are clear and present threat to the lives of Jamaicans and one of the biggest challenges to we face society. Fatality is one of the primary causes of death in the country, second only to the use of illegal firearms, and in particular among our young males. It is for this reason that the Ministry of National Security, in collaboration with Jamaica Consular Force and other stakeholders, set out to address the problem by introducing an effective traffic enforcement system, and especially with the new Road Traffic Act. Because, Madam Speaker, legislation may exist, but unless there is effective enforcement, then it leads nowhere. In order for us to achieve true and lasting behavior change among motoring public, for there to be good order on our roadways that will result in fewer road fatalities, there must be an effective system of enforcement to ensure deterrence. As we seek to improve the efficiency of our traffic enforcement operations, the major technology transformation branch of the Ministry of National Security has led the process of transforming the traffic ticketing management system into an end-to-end digitized ticketing system. To emphasize, Madam Speaker, the end-to-end digitalization of the ticketing system. So the system which we are looking at enhancing and improving for implementation has been around since 2010. In fact, it was procured in 2009, but has never been effectively implemented. And in fact, because of that, we've been looking at replacing it very early. The e-ticketing system is indeed a fully integrated, modernized mobile traffic ticketing system that supports all the agents that are involved in traffic enforcement. This, of course, necessitated significant enhancement of the old system acquired in 2009 because it was sitting around being partially used. But the result of that partial implementation was that few motorists were held accountable. Indeed, despite of the long list of complaints by all sides, including the government, in fact, I think after budget last occasion, 2021, the member from Central Assembly reminded that what I had indicated had been done on several occasions by the previous administration, where we had collective meetings of their stakeholders. And that is true, the record, that indeed, Madam Speaker, is true. The record will show that. Attempts were made to pull together the various teams, because indeed there are 5 critical agencies involved in enforcement of the Road Traffic Act. There's the police, which is the principal and on the forefront, in a sense, one of the principal agencies. There's the tax office, there is the Island Traffic Authority, and there's, of course, the court system, because breach of the Road Traffic Act is essentially a criminal act, but it is one that is designed to be managed a bit differently from, it's not a felon. And the ticketing system is in place to ensure that it's managed a bit differently. And you'll find that under the existing system, very little of those tickets were adjudicated effectively or prosecuted, and therefore there's a significant backlog, as I mentioned later. The end-to-end digitization of ticketing system will go live on February 1, 2023. And we're appealing, therefore, to motorists to take note of a new system and a new date. Not only will it increase the efficiency of the public safety and traffic enforcement officers by ensuring that motorists who break the law receive with immediacy the prescribed consequence, but importantly, it will nullify also speculation, corruption,
and avoidance. I implore all the motorists with outstanding tickets to make arrangements to have them paid by January 31st. I repeat, Madam Speaker, because there might be some members in here who have tickets seen as a minor infraction. Many people get them and accumulate them over time. As of the 31st of January, you will not be able to hide from being held accountable. Pay your tickets now. Right? The government has agreed, and the appropriate resolution brought to Parliament to do two things. One, all tickets that are given before the 1st of February 2018 will have an amnesty. They're not being taken into account, and that resolution brought to Parliament. Tickets that have been paid between the 1st of February 2018, that's closure, brought to those tickets, until the 31st of January, will have all their demerits points expunged. Again, Madam Speaker, all their demerit points, which allow for their license to be suspended or sometimes a period of time or other penalties executed based by the ITA, will be expunged. But we are not granting an amnesty for that period. You must pay your tickets, having breached the law. In fact, the research has demonstrated there are about 3,000 individuals who are regular offenders. So it's not a huge number. And the Chief Justice has indicated he's actually ensuring a night session at the traffic court on Saturdays, that members who are offenders can in fact pay the tickets. What we want is to get a clean system operation on January 3rd and the 1st of February. So for today, I'm appealing to you again. Get those tickets out of it. Get them closed off. If you're not closed by the 31st of January, all the penalties will carry on into the new era, as well as the additional penalties to be brought in now by the implementation or the beginning of the Road Traffic Act of 2018. The regulation will now be coming to force on the 1st of February 2023. So take advantage of this window of opportunity that has been provided by the government. Pay your outstanding tickets. It's a reminder that the Ministry of Transport will expunge all the merit points accrued from February 1, 2018 until January 2023. Pay your tickets, because after the 1st of February, there will be no hiding place for those ticketers. There are members out there.
House Leader, the member's time for speaking has expired.
Wait, what time I have?
Madam Speaker, I ask that the Minister be allowed sufficient time to complete his presentation.
How much was that? 12 minutes? 12 minutes already? All right.
Hold a moment, Minister. The question is that the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of National Security be allowed sufficient time to complete his presentation in statement by ministers. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it.
All right, we will get it done. Thank you, Madam Speaker. And may I thank my colleagues? So I'll begin where I ended. Pay your tickets by the 31st of January. After the 1st of February, there will be nowhere to escape to. The enhanced ticketing system guarantees that tickets and related information in the TTMS system will be accurate and readily available. It will lead to significant improvement in public order and safety as we are able to bring discipline to our roadways, and that's among the primary purposes of what we're doing. When a ticket is issued by the handheld device, the information is immediately available to all the relevant stakeholders. In addition, the printout the motorist will receive on the electronic version of the ticket via email. Ticket can also be paid online via the tax administration portal, and the process concluded quickly, conveniently, and non-contentiously. Because in the long run, Madam Speaker, my colleagues, what an effective ticketing system will do is that we can then, after we have executed on the traffic ticket, we can look at the generic ticket system to work with the Ministry of Local Government, that when we are seeking to introduce public order regulation, implement them, it will be non-contentious. Now the vendor on the roadside in the wrong location, rather than having somebody take away their goods, train and pick up back, and of course we can issue a ticket. The fines will be a deterrent. and there'll be less contention between security forces and citizens. Because ticketing offenses are designed not to create felons and criminal societies, to maintain good order. And that's what we're looking at. But immediate approach is to ensure we can execute on the traffic ticketing system and implement the Road Traffic Act effectively. The system is more than a 12-year-old system indicator, and they have had to go through a process of enhancement. But indeed, we have taken steps to ensure that by the time the enhanced expires, so to speak, the funding is in place, the budget requirements have come to the middle, agreed to in the preliminary agreement that an appropriate system will be put in place to succeed this system immediately, looking like 12 months down the road. Similarly, the Minister of Justice will be looking at a new court management system that will complement this, because while the ticketing system is a simple public order issue, the entire management of the criminal justice system is important to be made more efficient. And that is not my neck of the woods, but it impacts on the entire law enforcement sector. And the Ministry of Justice is taking steps to ensure that the court system is provided with supporting services. We have nothing to do with judgment education, but the courts must be provided with adequate support to advocate effectively. Because it's a failure of the system that has resulted in hundreds of thousands of tickets in storerooms at the traffic court. You know, I could mention, I say hundreds of thousands, not only to indicate. I think at one stage, we, with the Minister of National Security, assist them in clearing about 240,000. And I'm told there's about 500,000 down here, which has either not been, have warrants that issued, or they're just there, nothing able to be done about it, which is what created the failure in the system. Indeed, Madam Speaker, when the technical team examined the whole traffic ticketing system, although I said you're dealing with what's a simple ticket, $2,000, $3,000, that kind of fine, there were some 21 points of failure, which is why over the years there was just the patience and the commitment to execute seemed to fail. And of course, it was easy to blame, and I'm not here just to defend my police officers, but it was easy to blame the police officers that they are not issuing tickets and that policemen own all the taxis and robots on the road. As a matter of interest, in 2022, I'd like to point out, the police issued 720,000 tickets. You know, if they were not doing the work and enforcing, that would be so. And those tickets are there for the record. And what I can say to Madam Speaker is that they have shown an enthusiasm to use the new ticketing system. They are younger generation of police officers. They are more tech savvy than I am. And they like using the little machine, tick, tick, then they show you a ticket, and they know that it's going somewhere where to be it can be advocated if you fail to carry out your responsibility and pay. I'll mention briefly, I want to keep my time short, some of the points of failure, because the country should be aware, because we have kind of gone with this system over and over, and as I said, all governments from 2009, and my colleague remind me that this exact meetings we're proposing to have, and I've had, were held, and I do say one member from eGov said she got to a point where she was taking the same report, redating it and sending it to the meeting. Because we're saying the same thing over and over. But thankfully, Madam Speaker, this government has taken steps to prevent that cycle of frustration, and I'm able to say today that we are confident that on the 1st of February, a new system of prosecuting breaches of road traffic will be in place, and steps will take to ensure it will be sustainable and remain in place, because it's not only a question of implementing the Road Traffic Act and holding road hogs and those who breach road traffic regularly accountable. It's a critical part of restoring public order on our roadways and generally to get public order in the public spaces in an effective manner. The original ticket system had problem that issuance of traffic tickets, poor writing, and I had the experience of that. Judge Ramsey in Falmouth, I was going home, they gave me 2 tickets, but I was driving a VW bug, and there was a VW van before me. The gentleman wrote on the ticket, whoever was writing it, the driver of a VW van with my license plate number and my name. When I went to court a week later, Judge Ram said, were you driving a VW van at X date? Well, no, I drive a VW bug. And I went home. The traffic ticket submission to the data center failed to submit on time for early data entry. Big problem. Getting backlog, failure of system. Acceptance and logging of traffic ticket books at the data center. That is the ticket books that are, when they're written up, and processing tickets to receive in a timely manner. Lag time between receiving the tickets and the data entry. Big point of failure. Tickets not paid, nobody knows. Data entry errors. Scanning and uploading errors. Preparing unpaid tickets for submission to courts. Late submission of unpaid traffic tickets to the court. Data entry errors at TAJ. And they had in the TMS system a cashier system that could be used at the tax office. Easy, not put into use. Uploading of payments via the daily batch update, not being done. So, as I said, there were 21 points of failure. There are many things that are not being done because they're seen as simple breaches, but in fact was a reflection of a clogging of the entire court system. Indeed, only recently, courts set about to get a review of their data, the number, the court case they have. And they had access but never used before. And last year they took a review. 70% of the cases in court are traffic courts cases. Not 70% of the time, 70%. 70% of cases by sheer numbers are traffic cases. So if it takes a minute, it is absorbing a lot of our time. So part of the value of the new system and approach of digitalization, including digital signatures, which the Minister of Justice is due to bring to this House the appropriate amendment deeming the electronic signature appropriate, and also the electronic records to be part of the court's records, because the courts have informed that although there's an electronic data record act, it does not apply to much of the court records, which comes under two other acts, I think the Parish Court Act and the Justice of the Peace Act. So that is coming to ensure that all that can be in place, and we can therefore handle end-to-end digitization. So when the ticket is printed, you can't pull it again. You can't do anything to get it out. Sure.
What you just said a while ago is a very, to me, is a very significant part of the whole efficiency and working properly. If you don't have the signature, the electronic signature, when you write, when you're doing the thing and you send it without the officer, the charging officer signature, isn't that a deficiency then in the system and the preparation for court?
No, this is, the court is getting that, when they, as you're aware, and I can only take what I'm instructed as a lawyer, when the ticket moves to the court, it now becomes this information from, and it's also become the, it is the summons, and from that the warrant is printed. Now on the old system, first of all you had to print individual warrants, write them up, and then the judge signs it. Now remember the traffic court in Kingston, they're talking about a Thursday and Monday. No judge can sit in all day signing warrants or even printing them. Plus they had an old printer which printed one at a time. So, it was just a totally ineffective system. What we do is acquire the required software, hardware as well, and a printer that prints in batch. And now the justices are examining what electronic signature system, enterprise system that they can feel confident in to proceed to do digital signature. And at that point, you'll have a smooth running of the system, and we can hold them accountable. What it will mean, however, is that the number will decline, because when they go to court now, it will cost them much more than to go to the tax office. And since you can pay electronically, it will be easy. In fact, ultimately, in the first year, we expect to collect all our tickets. But as the drivers become sensitive to the efficiency and effectiveness of the new system, I expect you'll have less road abuse and therefore less tickets. But we'll in fact be able to collect, because currently we collect about 30%. Offenses may fall by 50%, but we'll get more fun. We still collect more tickets. So that's where we're heading. We continue to collaborate with our partners to fully implement the end-to-end system. Motorists must be mindful that as of February 1, 2023, traffic enforcement will be efficiently managed by the traffic ticketing system, and rogue motorists will not escape prosecution. All information will be readily available to the police officers who will be outfitted with either a smart check application in their vehicles or the handheld devices. The indisciplined motorists, the rogues must remember that when they attend court, they are at the discretion of the judge. The only point, remember, when they go to court, they can be applied maximum penalty. The ticketing, the fixed, what is called the fixed fine, is when fixed penalty notice goes to tax office and paid. As we are saying now, pay what you owe now, the tax office. After that, when you go to court, the judge has full discretion. We can pass the legislation, but we don't give judges guidance in their judgment. That's entirely in the court's purview, and we want to remind them. I say that, Madam Speaker, because there are some of the motorists who are regular offenders in a certain area of Jamaica that when they went to the traffic court, some of them advised the judge to read the newspaper. We get some serious complaints about judges in a certain court being overly harsh, while judges in certain areas were quite moderate, giving people time to pay their tickets and so forth. But as I said, remember, when you go to the court, you go there at the discretion of the judge and treat them with respect. And if you don't go to the lawyer, you put yourself at the mercy of the court. If you have a lawyer, the lawyer speaks for you. But you cannot, no one dictates to the court on that issue. The traffic ticket web lookup portal will also be launched, has already been launched. And the portal will allow motorists to check the status of their traffic tickets, print their records, and use it to attend the courts. So we are doing what is required to ensure that motorists can return to normal activity without too much contention. As of February 1, 2023, the portal will show how many demerit points you may have accumulated, and your license should have been suspended. So I encourage all employers to, as of February 21, then the demerit points will be available online, and employers having access to it can in fact indicate to a driver that they have to stop working, that their license will become suspended by the Island Traffic Authority. So employers can assist in good road behavior by keeping track of the conduct of the drivers. And it will also be on the road traffic an offense to employ a driver whose license has been come for suspension. So the employers not only have the incentive to have better discipline around them, but in fact they too can have the fine for employing someone whose driver's license has reached the level of demerit points have it suspended. I think they can be fined. The employer is liable to up to $30,000 or 10 days incarceration. Madam Speaker, the implementation of this end-to-end digitized traffic ticketing system will be a game changer in restoring public order and safety on the roadways. And it has turned out to be a good precedent to examining all of the digitization process, which is a part of the government policy to ensure that we have a more efficient and effective public service. The connectivity is being done because it's just crucial to get this done where the courthouses are connected, the police stations are connected, and the broadband connectivity, eGov coming on stream will ensure that that's effectively done. We currently have connectivity on a number of bases, but they're working well enough. That is the 5 critical courts near in the southern belt, corporate area, Spanish Town, Klein, have broadband connection. Others are connected through other cable systems and microwave system that will ensure that we are, I said, fully operational on the 1st of February. But in the long run, the government, eGov, will have a full broadband system, which will affect not only the traffic ticketing system and the public order system, but the entire operation of government, and really pull us into the modern age quickly. Our police officers are being equipped with the modern, rugged, handheld devices that have proven to improve their capacity and efficiency in traffic management. However, this is only the beginning. The digitized ticketing system can be expanded to address other areas of public order and restore a level of dignity and humanity in how the laws are enforced. I repeat that, Madam Speaker. while we introduce the traffic management system, a digitized ticketing system in the public order can be in public areas of public order and restore in the execution of public order regulations a level of dignity and humanity in how we enhance our laws. I said the public order issues are not there to create felons of our citizens. It's to maintain good order and give the authorities an effective way of implementing and maintaining public order without coming to, at some points, almost abuse the citizen. As an example of that, if the police go to shut down an event that may be exceeding the noise level, currently you have to take the equipment, modern, expensive equipment, and in conjunction with local government, we find it is disturbing the peace, it becomes a problem. With a good ticketing system, you issue a ticket, you warrant, and you're not that kind of contention between the security forces and others. It's much, much better. So no longer will sound equipment or vendors' goods need to be seized for breach of respective laws, unless there is some egregious or repetitive activity, but in normal circumstances. A properly designed digital ticketing system can be utilized in many instances. This is the forward-thinking, technology-enabled manner in which this government is seeking to restore public safety and good order in our society, Madam Speaker. If it pleases you. Thanks.
Opposition spokesperson, Member Phillips.
Madam Speaker, as the Minister rose to give his statement that come February 1, that the Road Traffic Act will come into being and the new ticketing system will also be in effect. Madam Speaker, we have been waiting near 5 years for this Road Traffic Act that we have spent many hours on in committees, in debates, and also waiting for the regulations to be tabled in the House. The disappointment, Madam Speaker, for us on this side, which has been promised by the administration, that there would be a fulsome public education that would have been put in place before the Road Traffic Act and its regulations coming into being. And now that we're coming closer to February 1, that public education, because there are many changes significant, especially the fines in the new Road Traffic Act and the regulations. The fines are way significant. But it is what we have promised in this House to the general public. And as a leader of opposition is saying, is that they are coming out of the passing of the Act itself and the regulations, that the general public also draw their own conclusion of what is in the Act, which in some instances are inaccurate. And I am sure that us as parliamentarians, who sometimes get questioned out there on the Act itself, that it is a great disappointment. I would like to state for the record, Madam Speaker, on behalf of the road users and every Jamaican who has to use the road, that we have not yet started that public education. And as usual, it will come after. Usually come after the Act has come into being. But Madam Speaker, as I have said publicly, Madam Speaker, that the Road Traffic Act in itself, as admitted by the Minister, that the Road Traffic Act itself will not cauterize the carnage that we are seeing on the road, nor the disorder that we are seeing out on our roadways. It is a bit frightening by the report that the minister has just gave us, that there are in 2022 some 720,694 tickets were issued. Just imagine, Madam Speaker, if we had more enforcement on our streets, how many tickets there would be that would have been issued. And the road, and Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, no, I'm saying that in your statement, said in 2022, 720,000 tickets were issued. And I'm saying if there was more enforcement, just imagine how many tickets. But I would want to ask the minister, though, how accurate is this number? Because if you have persons having more than 100 tickets out there without any prosecution, no, but over a period, how accurate is this figure? Right? But also, just to say that, Madam Speaker, through you to the minister, the Road Traffic Act and its regulation will not be successful unless we have effective enforcement.
So your message said you wanted to talk about insurance? I said I want you to talk about insurance. Most people know that bundling home and auto saves you money. Keep going. But did you know that new customers who bundle with Progressive can save an average of $800? Sleeping baby.
To the Jamaican people, it is how you are in government because it is your administration that has taken over 5 years to pass the new Road Traffic Act and its regulations. So it's a new year, Madam Speaker, to the Prime Minister. Even though a new year, we still need to know, Madam Speaker, Mr. Prime Minister, seriously, because we were close, if you look at the numbers of carnage on the road, we were close to the year before, but nothing has really changed. And I'm just saying that the effectiveness of because all of us are happy that there's a new Road Traffic Act coming into being.
The member's time for speaking has expired.
Speaker, we revert to the standing order in both the letter or the spirit of it, and in the context we ask that the member be expended by the 3 minutes to complete.
Question is that the member be allowed a few more minutes to complete the statement. Those in favor? Those against, the ayes have it.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. Madam Speaker, as I wrap up, though, the minister in his statement spoke about 70 active handheld units. And I remember at a standing committee meeting was asked the question, how many handheld units would you need to provide for the island? And I think the figure was close to 1,000. But you had, and in your statement you mentioned that you have acquired additional. So if we could know how many additional and the time frame of rolling out island-wide as is. How would, because I would imagine that officers would also be walking with the book, just in case of areas that there are no signal for them to use a handheld. But maybe if we can find out from yourself or the Prime Minister, how soon will a public education program be rolled out in dealing with the new Road Traffic Act and its regulations? I think it is very important that that is be considered, and also to give the road users some more information on the Road Traffic Act itself. Madam Speaker, we on this side welcome the new trafficking ticketing system. As I said before, previously, is that we had 5 years to get the systems in place, but they say better late than never. What is the time frame for that new upgraded system also that you have spoken about in your statement of that system being purchased and put in place? Because what you're going to end up happening is hearing at some point that the system is overloaded. Because in your own statement you said that there are deficiencies with this system. But for efficient continuity, what is the time frame for that new ticketing system? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you.
Member,
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Minister.
I did not acknowledge you, member. Hold a moment.
It's a question. I was going to pose a question. Minister.
No.
I recall on the Act, in the many stages, different stages of the discussion of this Act in the House. And even now, the Act principally focuses on the safety aspects and to make sure that breaches, people are held accountable, and that's correct. But there's also an economic regulation, a role that it plays for commercial vehicles and other business activities on the road. My understanding was that there is a further discussion to be had, a review of aspects of the legislation affecting commercial vehicles. If you could tell me where we are on that and when is that likely to occur, because that's an important part of the overall.
Before you respond, Minister, Member Hilton, thanks very much for your question. In future, members, please indicate first you would like to ask a question, allow the Speaker to acknowledge you as is required, and then you proceed. Thank you very much. Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. May I begin at the end. The question of regulation dealing with commercial vehicles. Remember, I'm here dealing with enforcement. The road traffic, the minister responsible is to the Minister of Transport, and will be able to speak to that and make a note of the question. I'm sure he'll bring that. But my primary purpose here today is to remind the public, is to inform the public on the question that the minister, the member from Manchester raised, that the Road Traffic Act will be implemented effectively and efficiently on this government as of the 1st of February. I said there will be no escaping from it. And that's why I'm here to encourage them that if they have tickets outstanding, we pay them. We know the numbers, we know the names. There's a core of about just under 3,000 offenders that really do repeat offensive. We can give that data to you. We have looked at it data. It's not that every Jamaican is on. It's really about, they have them, some have 50 tickets or more. There's a crew of operators in the corporate here, in a Perth corporate here, which have some have almost 1,000 tickets. It's the same repeating grouping. So we have the name. They're about, yes, I think that's about, if I recall correctly. It's about 2,880, right? The corporate, all over this part, between St. and the corporate, we're familiar with the system. You know, if they don't pay, they are not held accountable. So they just don't pay. Bear in mind, you only get demerit points when you pay. So they don't pay the tax office, they don't get a warrant, so they get nothing against the ticket is there. That's how the system was operating. And why I've emphasized that the newly instituted digitized system, which will go end-to-end now, so that in fact warrants will be printed. That's why I have to get the amendments to ensure that the electronic record will be a part of the record of the court, and that the signature will also be electronically done. So if in fact 500 tickets end up at next month on Monday in February in the courts, those 500 tickets will have 500 warrants printed and the appropriate signature attached, and the traffic enforcement branch of the police will have the warrants to deliver. And since they are known, they can easily be found. Currently, you know, we have had people going there and you have had to lock them up, etc., but they just keep repeating offenses. In the demonstration in November, I could say, Madam Speaker, I was invited to watch the police operate, just to observe. And the young officer, who, as I said, was quite efficient and enthusiastic and moving about his business very proficiently. And he invited me to take a look at what happened. He pulled over a driver. Didn't know him, he didn't know, I didn't know him. And he went through the system, and then, of course, when he got the ticketing, punched in. The driver was outstanding 500 tickets. So that has been the inefficiency of the system. The points are fairly identified, but if you take the current execution of the system, it have 5 critical points. The Ministry of National Security is more storage and management. But from the police, it is supposed to go to the tax office, Island Traffic Authority, and the court system. If it fails anywhere along there, obviously it fails. But one of the big points of congestion was because I said when they didn't pay, there was no incentive to pay at the tax office. It went to the court. The court's infrastructure, the judges were willing, but the infrastructure supporting the court was ineffective, and therefore they just accumulated thousands of tickets. The Chief Justice has been very cooperative, having attended individual stakeholders meeting to see that they find what he needs in his courts, and has got the assurance of the Ministry of Justice that they'll be so provided that they can advocate and move efficiently to deal with this problem. It's an annoying problem, it's a great public order problem, and it is being dealt with effectively at this point in time. So successive individuals have failed. In this particular case, not only the Chief Justice took part, the Prime Minister got involved as they brought, not only the chairman of the Road Safety Council, but the fact is agencies beginning to move, not quite in sync despite of both my involvement, the Minister of Justice, the Minister of Transport, the Minister in the Prime Minister's office, and we had to literally exercise all the authority to ensure they came together in sync. So I can say today we'll be moving off in February, and there will be an effective enforcement of our traffic ticketing system, which will not only be effective at traffic, but will begin to provide the basis for a whole ticketing system. And then to end on the note by the member from Manchester, the funding for the new system to replace this 12-year-old one is already in place. Now, the budget requirements have been made. Minister of Justice have been all over looking at systems, and the Ministry of Finance have accepted from the Ministry of National Security the required financing. And e-gov, Mr. Vaz not here, has started the process of putting in place what is required to have the new system ready even before the financial year is out. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. House Leader.
Madam Speaker, the next statement will be made by the Minister of Education and Youth. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Invite to speak Honorable Favour Williams, MP, Minister of Education and Youth.
Yeah. I do. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the CPFSA, Child Protection and Family Services Agency, is the safety net for abused children. Every year, the CPFSA responds to approximately 12,000 of our children in distress. Some of these children are beaten by the adults in their lives, sexually molested, mentally tortured, not loved, made to feel unwanted. Some children are killed. Children hang themselves, they drown, they're hit by vehicles, maimed, burned, or have other atrocities happen to them. Some of the situations could have been prevented were the adults entrusted with care of these children exercising the utmost care by keeping these children in their sights, especially the little ones. Many times when the CPFSA is called on its emergency phone lines, these children have to be rescued and separated from their families or caregivers and placed in a facility, whether it's foster care, government, or privately run homes. Longer-term solutions sometimes include adoption. We expect, Madam Speaker, and rightly so, that the CPFSA being the last resort, the safety net for these vulnerable children, and having seen all the atrocities that have been visited on vulnerable children, would exercise the utmost care when these children come into their care. Madam Speaker, the CPFSA has offices and operates in all 14 parishes. There are approximately 5,000 children in care, of which some 1,200 are in the foster care system, some 1,500 in children's home, 500 in places of safety. We have children in family reintegration, and there are other children on supervision. That is, the child remains at home and a social worker supervises the child in his or her home, depending on the situation to which the CPFSA responded and the CPFSA's assessment of the level of risk. For fiscal year 2022-2023, the budget of the CPFSA is $3.1 billion. In the child protection sector, watchdog agencies include the Office of the Children's Advocate, OCA, whose report was laid in Parliament today. Madam Speaker, by now, Jamaicans may know that in December 2022, the OCA, Office of the Children's Advocate, completed its investigation of a matter involving a non-profit organization named Embracing Orphans and its CEO, Carl Robansky, in a report titled Report on Investigations into the Questionable Relationship between the Child Protection and Family Services Agency, CPFSA, and Embracing Orphans / Carl Robansky. This report followed public revelations in March 2021 that Carl Robansky, founder and CEO of Embracing Orphans, an organization with a long-standing relationship with CPFSA to provide transitional facilities for young girls who were transitioning out of the care of the state, had his teaching license suspended in Washington due to inappropriate conduct with a minor. This suspension of the teaching license happened in 2014. The lease between Embracing Orphans and the CPFSA for the transitional facility called Father's House dates back to 2011. And just by way of a timeline, it was back in 2007 that Robansky established a presence in Jamaica. The relationship with the CPFSA dates back to 2009. This revelation of the suspension of license of the founder and CEO of Embracing Orphans for inappropriate behavior with minors came to my attention through the public media in March 2021. I immediately requested a report of the CEO of CPFSA and issued directives to immediately sever all ties with the organization known as Embracing Orphans and with its founder and CEO, Carl Robansky. In a letter dated April 1, 2021, I wrote to the OCA to request that as part of its investigation that it had announced that it would do, I asked that the OCA also seek to determine whether Carl Rubansky had any inappropriate contact with children in Jamaica, similar to the situation that led to the suspension of his teaching license in Washington. I also indicated to the OCA that the Ministry of Education and Youth stands ready to provide any assistance required. Since March 2021, I have relentlessly sought to ensure that I keep on top of this and that I get reports on the matter. And in the statement to Parliament, I've chronicled the dates and what was reported in those meetings. So on March 31, 2021, at a weekly legislation meeting at the Ministry of Education and Youth, which I attend without fail, this weekly meeting, unless there isn't a meeting, the CEO of the CPFSA reported that she had written a letter to Embracing Orphans that the CPFSA is disengaging and that CPFSA will seek to vacate the premises. On April 7, 2021, at another weekly legislation meeting, I reported that I had written a letter to the Office of the Children's Advocate acknowledging that the OCA had announced that they were going to begin an investigation and asked for the OCA to pay special attention to any interactions Carl Rubansky may have had with children who are wards of the state. In the same meeting, the CEO of CPFA reported that in-house counsel had completed a review of the lease for the property called the Father's House, and that the volunteer form and overall policy for volunteers was being reviewed. On April 14, 2021, the CEO of CPFSA reported in the weekly legislation meeting that she had received an opinion from in-house counsel regarding the purchase of the property, because that was one of the options given in terms of severing the relationships. We could look at purchasing the property. On May 14, 2021, the CEO of CPFSA reported in the weekly legislation meeting that she was taking steps to get out of the lease agreement and find alternative sites for the children. On June 2nd, 2021, the CEO of CPFSA reported in the weekly legislation meeting the following: that she was seeking to have the homes closed by June 30th, and that interest is being shown by another entity called Jamaica Relief Ministry, which is also an overseas mission that has a children's home in the West, and that due diligence will be done. She also indicated both ministers at the time would be visiting the property, which I did. By then, State Minister had departed the Ministry of Education. She also reported that she was hoping that within 2 weeks she would get answers from Jamaica Relief Ministry, and she reported as well on some of the children who are there in terms of where they are. Things like 2 of the children are in tertiary, and that the young people who are wards of the state are usually kept 2 to 3 years over 18 years old, during which time they are reintegrated with their families, or the CPFSA helps them to get ready to go into apartments, living spaces, so they can begin to live independently. Madam Speaker, I took the time to chronicle that, to show that I never let up on this matter in requiring reporting. On September 20, 2021, the CEO of the CPFSA in the weekly legislation meeting reported that the Jamaica Relief Ministry had agreed to take over the 2 properties. Transfer of the Father's House had been completed, and that the review of a new lease agreement would be completed in another week, and that the children would continue to reside in both premises. Madam Speaker, the OCA's report revealed that Jamaica Relief Ministry and Embracing Orphans have a relationship. This was never reported in any of the meetings, in any of the weekly meetings that we had. In a letter dated Monday, September 2021 as well, the OCA wrote an email with an update on the investigation to say that her office had been experiencing attempts to frustrate the investigation. In that letter of September 20, 2021, the OCA recommended that in order to avoid any interference, a named manager and a named house mother to be reassigned, as they have been actively reinforcing to the girls that they should not cooperate, and further, that the instruction originated from the CEO of the CPFSA. The OCA advised that given the very high level from which this instruction is allegedly coming from, that any interim manager who is selected for the facility not be from the ecosystem of the CPFSA, whether directly or indirectly. Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Education and Youth acted promptly on this request. By Tuesday, September 21, 2021, a replacement was identified. A replacement interim manager was identified. And
House Leader, the Speaker's time has expired. Your mic, House Leader.
Right, good. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the member's time be extended by 5 minutes in accordance with the standing orders to allow her to complete the presentation.
Question is that the member's time be extended by 5 minutes to allow for the completion of her statement by Minister. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, following that letter from the OCA for us to get an interim manager in the facility, the ministry acted promptly on this request. By the Tuesday, the request came in on Monday the 20th. By the Tuesday the 21st, a replacement was identified, and the administrative arm of the ministry set in motion the processes to reassign the named manager and the named house mother and put in place an interim manager in an effort to have the investigation proceed without interference. Madam Speaker, I want to say thank you again to the OCA for being diligent and unrelenting despite the actions to frustrate the investigation. By Thursday, September 23, 2021, an interim manager arrived at the father's house, which is the name of the transitional house for girls 18 years and older. I learned in the December 2022 report of the OCA, much to my dismay, that sometimes girls who are less than 18 years old were also placed in that facility, a clear violation of the duty of care. Madam Speaker, about 1 week from the date of the interim manager arriving at the transitional home, she wrote a memo addressed to me and CC'd to the then State Minister in the Ministry of Education and Youth. This came to me by way of the OCA and was dated September 29, 2021. The memo highlighted phone conversations between the interim manager and the CEO of CPFSA, in which the interim manager reported that the CEO was querying the involvement of the OCA, as all the ladies at the facility were over 18. There was also an issue that the interim manager called to our attention, which was that all the staff, not just the house mother and the manager, had been reassigned away from the facility, leaving the young ladies without support. There seemed to have been an unwise or mistaken directive from the administrative arm of the ministry to advise CPFSA to relieve all staff members. But once the interim manager raised the alarm, this situation was rectified. The very troubling part of what this investigation revealed is the attitude towards the girls in the father's house and the deception regarding the separation of the Ministry of Education and Youth from the Embracing Orphans organization and its founder and CEO. Further, Madam Speaker, on February 23, 2022, the CEO of the CPFSA, in a weekly legislation meeting, reminded us, when asked, that the partnership with Embracing Orphans was severed in March 2021. These weekly legislation meetings are virtual meetings, and so there is no mistaking as to what is reported because these meetings are recorded. On July 6, 2022, despite being told in February 2022 that the partnership was severed, I still continued my inquiry and was told by the CEO of CPFSA that nothing was heard yet about the OCA's investigation. She also reported that both transitional homes were being operated by Jamaica Relief Ministry and that the homes were given a subvention and there was monitoring of the placement of the children. Still, no mention of the relationship between Jamaica Relief Ministry and the Embracing Orphans. It took the OCA's investigation to reveal this. Madam Speaker, the OCA's investigation lays bare the many different points of contact that Karl Robansky had with the girls in the father's house, physically and virtually. Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Education and Youth gave an unambiguous, I should say the Minister of Education and Youth gave an unambiguous directive to the CEO of the Child Protection and Family Services Agency, PFSA, to sever its partnership and collaborative work with Embracing Orphans. The founder and CEO, Karl Robansky. I gave this directive as far back as March of 2021 when the story broke in the public domain about Karl Robansky and his inappropriate conduct with minors. So, Madam Speaker, the government has taken the first steps that it can take. This is a damning report, Madam Speaker. I am enraged when I consider that hearing the report, the explicit directives were given, there was constant follow-up. Madam Speaker, the situation is untenable. It cannot be defended. At the same time, I acknowledge that there has to be due process. There are two offices, that of the Permanent Secretary and that of the Public Services Commission, that are the constituted authority to assess these matters and make the right decision. When the report came to me from the OCA, I met with and requested of the Permanent Secretary that she writes to the Public Service Commission, as I was advised that such a letter can only come from the Permanent Secretary to the Public Service Commission, the constituted administrative offices. Such a letter has been written. I received a copy today. I've also asked of the permanent secretary that she use her administrative powers within the ambit of the law. I've also forwarded the OCA's report to the police for further investigation to see whether charges can be laid against anyone who is found to have abused or facilitated the abuse of children. No, I'm not finished. Madam Speaker, in plain and simple English, I was misled by the CEO of the CPFSA by a failure to report facts to me, despite the many times the CEO reported in our weekly meeting. I say again, the situation is untenable, Madam Speaker. It cannot be defended. Our duty of care for children in the care of the state can't just be an assessment that the matter did not rise to the level of criminality. Madam Speaker, we must take action, action that sends a clear message that those charged with the management and oversight of vulnerable children in the care of the state must do so with integrity. I laud those girls who had the courage to speak out. We want our children to know that we have a significant duty of care for them and all the children in the care of the state. We want our children in the care of the state to know that we will not go silent on this matter. A strong signal has to be sent that it is zero tolerance on behaviors that seek to compromise the duty of care of our vulnerable children in state care. Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, I have accepted the report of the OCA and the recommendations in the report. Based on the report of the OCA, it is not in the best interest of our children in state care for the CEO of the CPFSA to remain as head of agency while further investigation takes place. And so I call on her to step aside, at least while the Public Service Commission completes its deliberations. We have to send a clear signal of zero tolerance for the care of children, and that she, yes, to step aside, at least until the Public Service Commission completes its deliberation. It is only decent for that to happen. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Hold a moment, Member Mike. Thank you. We will now, thank you, Minister. We will now hear from the opposition spokesperson, Member Brownberg.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. If I could get a podium, that would be appreciated. Thank you. Madam Speaker, I want to thank the Minister for the statement that is before us, and I acknowledge and respect and accept that the report is being tabled to explain what the Minister did and how the Minister would have reacted to the situation that presented itself. The actual OCA report has been tabled today and would not have certainly allowed us sufficient time to go through the report to be able to respond with sufficient knowledge that's contained within the report. And so my responses, I present that as a backdrop to the responses that I make. But if I follow the statement from the minister, the first thing I want to say is to thank the OCA for actually being aware and doing the investigation and doing all that they have done to date. Minister, while I am pleased to hear of the steps being taken by you as ministry as it relates to what has really been almost frightening and inexplicable happenings at the CPFSA in terms of how our already vulnerable young ladies have been treated and what they have been exposed to and the further trauma that they have suffered. And it's important to know what you have done. But I also believe that we also require some kind of an analysis as to the failures in the system that could have led to this. Yes? So that we could begin to have a conversation as to how we prevent this. And I say that, Madam Speaker, acknowledging as the Minister did, that this organization is really one of almost last resort for vulnerable, at-risk children in our society, in this case young ladies, who have seen their fair share of being let down by adults in their lives, and to come and find an institution that should be protecting them, that has further exposed them, I mean, is beyond words. It's really beyond words. But, Minister, there's a little bit in the language that I am troubled by. So in your second paragraph, you say that we expect, and rightly so, that the CPFSA, being the last resort, the safety net for these children, and having seen all of that, that they would exercise utmost care as well. I want to go beyond expecting and hoping. I want to hear and know what is in place to ensure that the individuals, certainly at the top, but certainly those at the institution, are well aware of exactly what is included in their duty of care, so that they understand what is happening with individuals, with young children like the individuals here. Granted, it was a transitional home, and as you said before, you had expected that they would have been older. You did not realize, based on the report, until at the very end, that there were also minors, yes, 15 to 17 who were also lodged there. But I think it is important to understand the kind of training. It is also important to understand if there were programs on a regular basis that help to ensure, refresher courses for want of a better word, that the individuals who had the responsibility were clear on what to expect, what to look for, what should have been for them signs, yeah, that would have warranted additional intervention. So that is one. The report from my cursory glance says that the CPFSA should have been aware from as early as 2018 of some of the issues that have surfaced. But no, that they were aware. No, well, that's why I say should have been aware. They were aware as far back as 2018. And so that's part of why I raised the question, what can be done, should be done, to ensure that it does not take 4 full years of that kind of knowledge within the institution for there to be any redress and for there to be any action. I note, Minister, your letter of April 1, 2021, when you asked that the OCA also seek to determine whether Mr. Robansky had any inappropriate contact with children in Jamaica, similar to the situation that led there. And it's important that you would have asked that. The question is, how could the institution, having been aware in 2018 of some of that, not done a little, much more. I was about to say a little bit more, but no, that's not enough. Much more in terms of investigating to find out what kind of risks or these young ladies were exposed to and what was actually happening. Minister, I believe that you are sincere and that you are honest in what you have reported. So I don't want you to misunderstand what I'm about to say. But I find it almost inexplicable that a public...
The member's time for speaking has expired. House Leader.
Madam Speaking, in the same vein, I beg to move that the member's time be expended by 3 minutes to allow her to complete her presentation.
Question is that the member's time be extended by 3 minutes to allow for the completion of her response to statement by Minister. Those in favor? Those opposed? The ayes have it. Member?
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Thank you, House Leader. Thank you, members. I say I find it almost inexplicable that all of this could have been disregarded, that the ministers could have been misled in the way that the report suggests, to allow this to happen. And I'd really like to know, and I believe the rest of Jamaica is asking, what happened, how come? How did that happen? What I see also, Minister, that there was the issue in the transfer of the property from Father's House to the Jamaica Relief Ministry, and the fact that there should have been some due diligence. And I would love to know, in June 2021, based on all those who were in the know knew, why was it, well, what was the level of due diligence that was done in terms of this new entity that should have been occupying the Father's House, especially understanding that, again, it was an overseas mission that has a children's home in the West that was supposed to be taking it over. You know, I mean, was anybody concerned? What was the level of due diligence? Because to come now and hear that there was some connection between the operators and owners of both, which meant that you really had not changed hands, is really disturbing to me. Minister, in the request that you made on September 21st, 2021, for the replacement of the house mothers and so on, I wanted also to ask whether or not there was any admonition, not just to the house mothers and those that you were moving, but also to the CEO of the CPFSA, since by then it had become obvious that there was some interference from her in terms of the investigation and in terms of what she was advising those in charge. So that's that. As I end, I want to say that it raises once again that issue that keeps coming up over and over, which is the registration of known pedophiles. Yes? And how important it is to have a register so that we can identify these individuals before these failures happen and our children are affected in the way that they are affected. I think that's basically, I did ask earlier, I want to just put it as a question, in terms of the level of training and the level of refresher, overtime, that would prevent some of this, as well as I said earlier, the systems failure that would have allowed this to happen undetected for so long. And are we looking to see how we strengthen the system? Because it's not just about saying that, hey, I did all I could and my hands are clean. It is also about making sure that there's a system that can catch them much earlier.
Thank you, member. There is a question from member from St. Catherine Eastern.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. Minister, I'm not too certain in terms of it's so heartbreaking, though. I know, just
Members,
listening.
I'm going to ask you to please stick to asking a question.
I know,
no
but,
statements, direct question.
Yeah, but it's really, 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 for me today, it's a sad moment to really come here and to listen to this report coming from the minister. But, Madam Minister, can you say if there's a board of management in terms of the children's services who would report to you, or I do not know which organization, in regards to making sure that you do not have a long period of hearing of all of these different things, because there's a number of other things happening in these children's homes, you know. And for you to be able to act more swiftly. I would like to know what happened to the board of management that is supposed to be overseeing these homes and institutions.
Thanks, member. There is also a question from a member from St. Andrews, Southeastern.
The minister indicated that she was asking the CEO to step aside, and let me state up front, I support due process because obviously everybody has a right to give their side of the story. But I was a little surprised at the language of asking the person to step aside. And I wondered whether there was no mechanism within the public service in the interim that while that investigation is completed, that the person is instructed to be sent on whether administrative leave or some other thing, so that given the reports of previous interference that wouldn't take place. So I'm seeking clarity from you on that, because it suggests a request which may or may not be adhered to by the individual involved.
Thanks, member. Minister Williams.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Let me start with the question that has to do with the training of persons working in the child protection sector. So the persons working are trained social workers, and there's continuous development that they would go through periodically in their duty. Member, you asked the question, how could the CPFSA not have done more to investigate when they found out the situation of the inappropriate behavior when they found that out? And the CEO reported that she looked into the matter, but in her assessment, it did not rise to the level of criminality, right? And that is in the public domain. She was interviewed on radio, and that was the response. It is also in the report in front of you. And so, that may explain why the relationship continued over the time since then, despite knowing about what happened to this person in the U.S. With regards to the question about the board of management, the child protection sector is a kind of conglomeration of two separate entities that existed at some point in time. I can't remember exactly how long ago. They came together to form the Child Protection and Family Services Agency as an agency. So this entity does not have a board in the way that we know boards. They have what's called an advisory board that does not have any power to direct the agency. Of course, we have been looking at the structure of the entity that emerged because of the merger. We are looking at other entities to bring together in this ecosystem. That work is not completed yet. We recognized once I found out that the entity only has an advisory board, that was not tenable. Additionally, on the part of the minister, there's an advisory council as well that exists in this. So you can see we need to redo the structure of this entity in the child protection sector. What else?
Minister, you switch off the...
Madam Speaker,
Could you switch off the
I haven't got
mic?
an
You had an additional question in respect of the ability to do anything in the interim from the member from Southeastern.
So, member, as I said in my presentation, I recognize that we have to observe due process. I did list the Office of the Permanent Secretary and the Public Services Commission as the entities with the authority to take action. What I'm calling for, that while these entities and these offices, while they deliberate, while they do their own investigation, it is untenable to have the person continue to sit in the position when we know that there can be a process for that person to step aside. We've seen that in other situations, and wait for all the investigation and all the offices charged with investigating and looking further in this matter, and wait for that to be completed. And I'm simply highlighting that as a matter of decency, knowing full well the limits of the powers of a minister, but I can still use my moral authority to call on the CEO of the CPFSA to take that step. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. House Leader.
So
We have one final question for the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you. Minister, your statement primarily chronicles the efforts you made to keep yourself abreast of what was going on and to try and ensure that something was done about it once it came to your attention that this man had this past and had adverse action taken against him in the US. But your statement also speaks to deception. You say that you were told in a weekly legislation meeting in February 2022, you were reminded that it had been said previously that this partnership with the organization Embracing Orphans was severed in March 2021. And then you say that there was deception regarding the separation of the ministry from the Embracing Orphans organization and its founder and CEO. But what is not clear from your statement is what that deception was. I haven't read this report. It was just tabled this afternoon. We've been discussing many other things. But it's not clear from your statement in what way this officer deceived you or anybody else. And I'm wondering if you could just clarify what that deception on her part was. And to what extent, for example, does the report provide evidence that she was complicit or facilitated continued involvement, was aware of and facilitated continued involvement of this person with the Jamaican operation, father's house, after the time that you were told that the links were severed? Because when you read your statement, you use the word deception, but it isn't clear what that deception actually was. Yeah.
Minister,
my
and
statement.
Madam Speaker, just so that there's no misunderstanding, there's one question that I asked that is still on, that has not been responded to, and I'd like the Minister to also deal with that, which is the issue of the due diligence as it relates to Jamaica Relief Ministries taking over from Embracing Orphans.
If there are any further questions of the Minister, I'm going to ask that those questions be written so that the Minister may respond to them after. So that's the final question. Minister, could you please respond to those two questions from the Leader of the Opposition and the outstanding question from the Opposition?
So, member, my statement has to be read alongside the report that the OCA tabled today. And it's in that report that I found out that the new entity, Jamaica Relief Ministries, had a relationship with Embracing Orphans, and that was never disclosed in getting into that relationship. Yeah, one of the many. So with regards to the due diligence on Jamaica Relief Ministry, member, we have to depend on the entity charged with ensuring that these entities that they engage are properly vetted. The PFSA has a budget of $3.1 billion. It has legal persons working there. They're guided by the CCPA, which is the Child Care Protection Act. And so there is an expectation that professionals who lead the various entities across government, that they exercise a duty of care. And just because something is not asked for, it doesn't mean that it shouldn't happen or it didn't happen. And so I have to depend on the various heads of agencies to carry out the tasks and the job functions for which they are assigned.
Thank you. House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. At this time, I ask you to invite the Honourable Floyd Green, MP, Minister without Portfolio, in the Office of the Prime Minister, to make his statement. Thank you.
We will now have a statement by Minister. The Honourable Floyd Green, Minister without Portfolio in the Office of the Prime Minister. Happy birthday.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this House will recall that in 2022, when I made my sectorial presentation, the government had made a commitment to present the regulations under the National Identification and Registration Act 2021 to this House and to the general public for comments. Madam Speaker, I want to start this short statement by really thanking the persons who we often don't see, but the technical teams that work tremendously hard behind the scenes to bring these documents to fruition. Yes, I think we should really. So, Madam Speaker, I want to thank the NIDS project executing team, our permanent secretary at the Office of the Prime Minister, our senior legal officer, the Chief Technical Director, Ms. Judith Grant, our Chief Parliamentary Counsel, and the Attorney General Chambers. You know, Madam Speaker, when I came into this role and we sat down, the team really worked hard and they had a draft prepared by August. And I can tell you, between the Chief Parliamentary Counsel and the AG Chambers, they really put it through intense scrutiny. And there were a number of times that they sent their comments and the team had to work straight through the night to get it back to the AG's chambers to get us to reach to this stage. Madam Speaker, it is intended that the National Identification System will make the lives of our citizens easier. And it will make it easier for people to do business in Jamaica. You know, the approach that we've taken, Madam Speaker, is to ensure that we are participatory and inclusive in rolling out our national identification system. We would have benefited from a joint select committee where the primary legislation was able to take a number of inputs, including inputs from the opposition, from members of the legal fraternity, ICT practitioners, private sector stakeholders. And I think that gave a number of our citizens a better opportunity to understand that NIDS is really here to help us as a society. What we plan to do now, Madam Speaker, is to lay these regulations on the House in this draft form so that they can be taken, considered, reviewed, and feedback can be given to us before we take the debate of the regulations. So today, Madam Speaker, we have laid 4 draft regulations. The National Identification and Registration Regulations 2023, and these regulations seek to outline the practicalities from the application, enrollment, cancellation, renewal. The forms that are going to be used for people to apply will be there, so the forms are attached and people will see what the application form looks like. People will see the process that they would go by if they're seeking to cancel. People will be able to see how persons with disabilities and others requiring assistance, such as the elderly, will be able to access NIDS. The regulations also outline the type of documents that may be accepted, the form of the national identification card, and also what fees, the national identification card will be free. But if you were to lose the card, if you were to mutilate the card, that is also outlined in terms of whether there are fees so attached. The other draft regulation that is tabled is the National Identification and Registration Information Security Regulations. These are perhaps, Madam Speaker, the most important regulations to many persons because people are genuinely concerned about the steps that will be taken to ensure that their information is secure. So the regulations does go into great detail to treat with issues such as security standards, processes, practices that the National Identification and Registration Authority will be expected to abide by. If the authority fails to do so, the National Identification and Registration Inspectorate and indeed the Parliament is empowered to bring the authority back into line. We have also laid the National Identification and Registration Assignment of National Identification Numbers Regulations. Madam Speaker, hopefully it has not missed us that how we have now arranged the scheme for the National Identification System is that your National Identification number will be identical to your tax administration number. So if you already have a TRN number, when you go to sign up for the National Identification System, that will become your National Identification number. And those who are not yet taxpayers, when they get their National Identification number, they will not need a separate number to be their TRN when they so elect to get a TRN number. So we have a draft regulations that is going into detail in that regard. The final regulation that has been tabled is the National Identification and Registration Appeals Tribunal regulation. Madam Speaker, by law, it is critical that the public authority which will be established, the National Identification and Registration Authority, has an appeal process that is built into our national identification system, and this regulation outlines how an appeal may be made, including the necessary forms. We are sharing the regulations here in hard copy. We are also putting the soft copies up on the National Identification website. That is www.nidsfacts.gov.jm, so people can access the regulations via that website. And I'm very sure that the House of Parliament will also place the regulations on their website. What we're asking people to now do, Madam Speaker, we're encouraging the members of this House to take the regulations, to speak to their various constituencies, to inform their constituents, and to get feedback, and to pass that feedback to the Office of the Prime Minister. I also urge all Jamaicans, eligible residents, to read the regulations. Feedback should be provided to the Office of the Prime Minister, the NIDS project executing team, and we have established an email address, customercare@nids.gov.jm. Also, Madam Speaker, we have designed a form on the NIDS Facts website so people can literally go to the website, read the regulations, and provide real-time feedback using that portal. It is intended that the regulations will be in place by the first quarter of the new financial year. So, Madam Speaker, we are urging persons so interested to provide their feedback by the 21st of February 2023 so that we can review, bring any changes necessary, and then we can have a debate in the House. Again, Madam Speaker, we are determined to make the life of our citizens easier, but we're also determined to ensure that they participate in this process. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minister. Turn your mic off, please, Minister.
I won't be long, but I would commend the Minister for the approach of consultation, the approach of inclusivity, and the approach of allowing the citizens. Mr. Morgan, I want the Minister to hear me. I say I want to commend you for the approach of inclusivity and consultation, and for providing sufficient time for persons to review it. And if we had started this way, we would have been much further down the wicket. But I'm not going to go back here. So we will reserve our comments when we have gone through the regulations.
Thank you very much. Announcements?
Laid on the table of the House today are the following: special reports of investigations conducted pursuant to Section 33 of the Integrity Commission Act, namely, the special report of investigation conducted into allegations of irregularity, conflict of interest and corruption in the award of certain contracts by Petrojam Limited, Petrojam Report Number 3, and the special report of investigation concerning the circumstances surrounding the procurement process or processes for the award of contracts for the provision of Rosenbauer fire trucks, that is, pumpers, through the National Safety Limited by the Jamaica Fire Brigade. The Jamaica Gazette Supplement, Proclamations, Rules and Regulations, Volume 145, number 318, dated Wednesday, December 28, 2022, Proclamation number 20 of 2022, Public State of Emergency declared by the Governor General. The Jamaica Gazette Supplement, Proclamations, Rules and Regulations, Volume 145, number 319, dated Wednesday, December 28, 2022, Proclamation number 21 of 2022, Public State of Emergency declared by the Governor General. The Jamaica Gazette Supplement, Proclamations, Rules and Regulations, Volume 145, Number 320, dated Wednesday, December 28, 2022, the Emergency Powers, Parishes of St. Anne, Clarendon, St. Catherine, Kingston and St. Andrew, Regulations 2022, and the Jamaica Gazette Supplement, Proclamations, Rules and Regulations, Volume 145, Number 321, dated Wednesday, December 28, 2022, the Emergency Powers, Parishes of St. James, Westmoreland and Hanover, Number 3, Regulations 2022, under the Emergency Powers Act. Ministry Paper Number 1 of 2023, titled Annual Report of the General Legal Counsel for the Financial Year 2021-2022. Annual Report of the Auditor General's Department for the Financial Year 2021-2022. Annual Reports for the Kingston Waterfront Redevelopment Company for the financial years 2013-2014 and 2014-2015 respectively. Office of the Children's Advocate's report on investigation into the questionable relationship between the Child Protection and Family Services Agency and Embracing Orphans and Mr. Karl Urbanski. Addendum to Compliance Audit Compendium Report on COVID-19 expenditure of the Ministry of Health and Wellness and the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, and the following unsigned draft regulations which are to be made under the National Identification and Registration Act and are tabled today for your information and consideration. The National Identification and Registration Regulations 2023, the National Identification and Registration Appeal Tribunal Regulations 2023, the National Identification and Registration Assignment of National Identification Numbers Regulations 2023, and the National Identification and Registration Information Security Regulations 2023.
Thank you. Bills brought from the Senate, petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally, questions and answers to questions, motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice, motions relating to the sitting of the House, motions for leave to introduce bills, presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained, public business. House Leader.
Madam Speaker, it is not intended to do any further business for the day. However, I just would like to indicate to members that a third supplementary estimate is coming for the 24th, 25th, and 26th. So we prepare ourselves for that, for the 24th, 25th, and 26th. 24th to be tabled, 25th for PAAC, and 26th for the debate. And I think members will be particularly interested in that particular third supplementary estimate. Madam Speaker, I therefore invite you to adjourn the House for a date to be fixed. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
There being no further business, the question is that the House do adjourn for a date to be set. Those in favor? Those opposed? The ayes have it. This honorable House now